Hello and welcome to tonight's show.
Welcome to another day in paradise and welcome to the last video about Cuba before we head over to the Dominican Republic for just a couple of days. Today I'm going to tell you a little something about how to travel Cuba, what to have in mind, what to be aware of. To build this knowledge, I spent 24 days in the country. We did a round trip where we started in Havana, then went down to Vinales, from there went over to the Bay of Pigs and stayed in Playa Girón, from there over to Cienfuegos, Trinidad, and then after that we've been to Santa Clara, spent a couple of days in Varadero, and then headed back to Havana from where we flew out. First things first, traffic and how to get around, how to do a round trip, stuff like that. From my own experience, I'm not really sure if it's even possible like to rent a car for yourself, but you can get around by taxis, shuttles and stuff like that quite easily, because your accommodation, depending on where you're staying, will make it possible anyways. But it's a little pricey sometimes because you will be crammed into a shared taxi if you try to save some money, and still will pay a lot of dollars. If you want to know how much, then check out the latest video where I broke down all the costs of those 24 days. Something to notice here as well is that most roads are not in a good condition, but if your car happened to broke down like your taxi, there will be people stopping and helping you, especially like all the old timers. They seem kind of connected to each other and help each other out a lot, and it always seems like kind of big family. And there are also buses, so you can do longer routes with that as well, but you really have to check schedules and you have to see where and how to get the tickets if they are available. There was kind of a struggle when we tried to get back from Varadero to Havana to get a bus in time, because we had to be in Havana to get out, so we drove there 2 days early just to make sure. Next thing is food. The most typical dishes always consist of a mixture of rice, beans, corns, beef sometimes, or pork and stuff like that. And the most typical Cuban thing is rum, obviously, and cigars, but I'm not really sure if that counts as food. For vegetarian options, that was always quite easy to get and find. Vegan, not so much. Next thing is accommodations. I mentioned those before, and we stayed in casa particulares most of the times, so that's kind of Airbnb where mostly really nice older Cuban women rent out rooms or parts of their house, and then you can stay there. And that's really nice because they might cook for you if you ask for it, or they offer to make a dinner for you and then you pay a little price for that. And also in Vinales, they organized everything for us. Like, okay, do you want to do tours? The whole family was kind of involved. Like, we did a night trek to see the sunrise with the son of our host, and the husband was driving us around in his car, and also later on drove us towards Havana to get to the next stop. So that was really nice. And in almost all cases, they knew someone in the next town you were going to, and they called them up and were like, yeah, I have a guest that's coming to your town. Do you have rooms available? And like that, we jumped from place to place without even having really to search for an accommodation to stay in. And that made it quite nice and easy. And also you will support the locals. One host we were staying with was a doctor before, but she said as the political system is as it is, she wasn't really making much money from it, and she was better off hosting this casa particular than working in a hospital, where she said it is kind of hard in this system to treat people and patients in a hospital, so that was kind of frustrating for her, so she decided to quit. Speaking of, next topic are people, and I really highly recommend, like always and in each and every country, get in touch with the locals, talk to them, have a nice conversation. They might tell you a little more about the behind the scenes, about the political system, about the rules and the laws in the country, and that's always knowledge, and you might find a new friend. On the road with driving the taxis, we had some conversations with the taxi drivers. One got really angry when we talked about the Cuba problem, which I'm going to talk about later as well. And I already made a video about that. And he was like, you really felt like he wasn't happy with the situation as it is right now. And that, yeah, it was kind of sad to see, and I felt sorry for him, but you really felt his passion. I think you can learn about life and the world and political systems this way the best. On the other hand, obviously in a quite poor country like Cuba, sometimes they might see you as money, because you are money. And a lot of places poverty is a really big problem. And then you come around with all the money to spend you have on you. They sure try to get some off of you by offering different services and stuff like that, or really trying to get you into buying stuff or doing another tour or into entrance fees and stuff like that. Really reliable, sometimes a little sad, but I think that's okay. And in most cases I didn't feel bad about it. I liked to support the people, so yeah, that was quite okay with me in most cases. Obviously there are some exemptions every now and then and everywhere. Next one, beaches, activities and highlights. And for me, the Cuban culture and the vibe and the people and how they were, that was the absolute highlight. Especially like, it is environmentally, it's a catastrophe, but driving around in that old-timer in Havana with a guy who spoke really good English, and he was teaching and talking about Cuban history, about the political system a little as well, and obviously about all the landmarks in the city. That was really cool and a nice experience. I highly recommend that. And also Vinales was really cool because it was so different with all the mountains, and especially to do that night walk up the hill, up the mountain to see the sunrise. I really like that, even though it was not the best sunrise I've ever seen, but the experience in total was really cool. And the Bay of Pigs, I really liked that as well. For the history and the museum we visited there, but also for it was kind of chilled vibes, also in Trinidad as well. But yeah, it was really laid down and a lot of cool stuff to do and just to hang out. Also we met Matt and Sarah there. There was a cherry on top. Shout out to you guys. Hope to see you one day again.
Time now for your latest weather forecast.
Speaking of Bay of Pigs and maybe have a plunge in the water, let's talk about the weather. And I mean, look at the chart. Cuba is just perfectly fine all year round. There is a hurricane season though, which is from July to October. But apart from that, there is a lot of sun, there are warm temperatures, there's very little rain. Sometimes like in this June to October hurricane season there will be like rain showers, but apart from that most of the time it will be quite nice as well, so you can't really go wrong with going there. One of my favorite topics, snorkeling and diving, and I already did a whole video about the diving experience in the Bay of Pigs. If you haven't seen that yet, check out the playlist at the end to see it. But yeah, to sum it up, I would say equipment wasn't too good at that spot. I'm not sure if that counts for other spots as well, but it was really cheap. The experience, the diving and what to see was quite nice, but I would totally recommend snorkeling. You will be pretty good with that. Water is clear and nice, and you will have a quite nice snorkeling experience off of the bay, depending on where you are. Like up in Varadero, I was snorkeling around, there was like nothing at all, but in the Bay of Pigs, as I said, it was really nice. In the Cueva de Peces, also you had a quite cool experience. There is another video about that as well, so check that out later maybe as well. On top of that, in the southeastern part, which we didn't reach, there are some diving islands, and you can do like lifeboat trips, which are quite expensive, so I skipped on those. But those dive spots are supposed to be absolutely breathtaking. So if you have the time and if you have the money and be at the southeast coast, maybe do that as well. Let's get to the next section, which are the rapid fire questions. And in these we are going to tackle some questions, and I'm not going to talk that much, but just answer those questions. So the most valuable item will be US dollars, because without those you can't really get around. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check out my latest video. There I'm going to explain that in depth. So that was not rapid answer, but we are going to continue on. Which style of clothes should you bring? As we've seen the weather forecast, warm and light clothes will be absolutely fine. Missing item for us, it was more US dollars, because we had very little with us, and that was quite a problem. The best place in my opinion was Vinales, as I already said. Havana, especially if you look behind the scenes and explore the city by foot and see more of the real life, and also Bay of Pigs, as I already mentioned. The overrated place for me was Varadero, but I'm going to explain that later on why and if you should go there. Language spoken obviously is Spanish. In Havana you might come across a lot of people capable of speaking English, but the further you get away it gets a little harder, and then you should have some Spanish words on your hand. For example, hola is hello, gracias is thank you, por favor is please, yes, sí, no is no, and adiós is goodbye, and haga clic en el botón suscribirse is click the subscribe button. Only do so if you haven't done that yet, and maybe if you're down there already, then click the like button as well. Thank you very much. Let's move on. The currency in Cuba is the Cuban peso, and as I already told you in the last video, $1 equals about 120 Cuban pesos. But if you convert it the other way around, 170 Cuban pesos will give you $1. So you might lose a lot of money, and that's why I already told you, bring a lot of US dollars. You will be able to pay with that everywhere, and you will not have to deal with those up exchange rates. Who is Cuba for? In my personal experience and opinion, it is good for people interested in culture, political systems, and also in the history of Cuba, because you will get quite a good glimpse into it, especially if you talk to people. And also it's really good for time travelers, because you can find horse carriages which are used as taxis everywhere, old cars, and it is kind of interesting and a little different from other places. More about that later as well. Who is Cuba not for? In my personal opinion, for everyone considering going to Varadero, but I'm going to talk about that later a little more, as I already said. Should you go with guides, tours, or go on yourself? Like I already mentioned, I'm not really sure how far you can get on your own, so I would highly suggest doing everything with tours, guides, sometimes maybe stroll around on yourself. Like I said, in Havana you can see some different places from a different angle and perspective if you go on your own, but like to getting around the country, and especially like there are places to get into like the Laguna de la Guanaroca. That is totally fine. With a guide you will learn a lot more, and it's not too expensive in Cuba either, so why don't do it? Internet and phones was a really big problem in the past, but by now it's way easier. You can get a SIM card if you don't know how and want to know that. Check my first Havana video, there I'm going to explain where and how to get those. And then you can have mobile data for the whole time staying there. That comes with some limitations at some times and some places. We didn't have any connectivity at all, but in most cases it was totally fine. A little slow though, but it was fine. And sometimes not all the pages are reachable. For the safety, we felt quite safe almost everywhere. With that comes again the reminder to be aware and to act smart. We didn't always do that, as we followed a guy into a alley and a weird hallway to buy or to see some cigars, and then in the end, yeah, we ended up in a room with like 3 men, and there were some cigars on the table, and I was like, I'm not really feeling it, but it was kind of a weird feeling to say, thanks, but no thanks. Can we leave, please? Like, that was weird. So rather don't do that and follow strange people into strange places. Lesson learned, hopefully. For a visa, I'm not really sure about if you come from the US, as I know most of my viewers, you come from the US. I am not really sure, to be honest, what the visa regulations are right now for Europe or Germany. There are tourist cards that you have to get prior. We booked it like, I think it was 3 months before going there. Then that will be sent back to your home, or you can get that from the company you are going there with. And then you just have to take that into the country, and then you will get your stamp that would normally go into your passport into this tourist card. And that's like an option or a way so that you can later get rid of it. And if any countries like maybe the US will check your passport, there will be no Cuban stamps in it and you don't get any problems, hopefully. Next one is there a culture shock? And I would say yes, depending a little on what you do, because if you go to Varadero and just stay in an all-inclusive hotel and don't leave the hotel at all, you will get a feeling of, oh, that is quite nice, and it's not a poor country at all. What is everybody talking about? What's the big deal? But if you leave that, or if you go into Havana, like I said, just stroll around a little bit and you will see poverty. And that can quite get to you, and it's not always easy to take that. So be aware of that and decide if you want to do that. Are there any scams to be aware of? As I already told, cigars are quite a problem. You can't really tell, like, these are real, these are fake, these have like a bandage around it, this box is sealed, and you're like, I have no idea what that means. So either you have to inform yourself before going there very well, and then go there with a little more knowledge and be able to make better decisions about that than we did. I ended up not buying any cigars or rum in the end at all, even though it was one of our last countries, but I was like, no, I don't really have any idea which is good or fake or stuff like that. So yeah, I didn't buy any. What else is there to say and know? I already told you about the problem with the currency exchange. Another problem is the poverty. You will see people really like starving or being really hungry in Havana, and then in Varadero if you're in an all-inclusive hotel. As I was there, I've been there and I've seen it, and I didn't like it for myself. If you want to go there, do that. You have to decide that on your own. But for me it just felt wrong to be in Havana first and at the end again, and to see the poverty there and that people don't have anything to eat, and then to be in Varadero surrounded by tourists in an all-inclusive hotel, and a lot of people were like, just, yeah, I want more of this, more of that, more of that, and I was like, nobody in this country will have a dinner or breakfast like that. And then after half a plate, people were like, I don't really feel like it, I'm full, I don't want that anymore. And then it was just thrown away, and that was really heartbreaking for me to see, and it didn't feel good. So next time I would skip Varadero completely and rather see the real Cuba than seeing Varadero. Another big thing in my opinion is the Cuba problem, I called it, and I dedicated a whole video to that as well, which is in the playlist at the end as well, so maybe check that out if you haven't already. In a nutshell, it's about the US still seeing Cuba as, okay, it's a socialism country and it's kind of terroristy, so they try to prevent you from going there, or they don't want you to go there and support Cuba with your money. So they make it harder for you to get into the US after you've been to Cuba. So you really have to think and decide, do I want to have their troubles with going into the US after I've been to Cuba, or do I skip Cuba in total and rather go with the ESTA, which you're only eligible to if you haven't been to Cuba since, I think it was 2021 or something like that. But as I said, I talked about that more in the other video, so have that in mind, inform yourself about all the consequences that might come with a Cuba travel. Last but not least is authenticity, and in my opinion, by now Cuba is as authentic as it gets with all that time travel stuff. Like I said, except from Varadero, that's a little different, but the rest of the country, at least the places we've seen, that's Cuba. You won't find any McDonald's, Burger King or stuff like that anywhere at all, and I'm really glad that I've been to Cuba before that happens, because I guess that's only a matter of time, and it was really nice to see it as it is right now. As I already told you, this was the last video of the Cuba series. We are going to the Dominican Republic next, but that's only for a couple of days stay over, and then there are European countries to be next. So if you don't want to miss out on it, as I already told you, please make sure to subscribe, then you won't miss out. If you hit the bell, you also will be notified about the newest video, and the like helps the channel grow and makes me really happy, so thank you for that. See you in the next one. Until then, enjoy life, have a good one, explore countries, support people, have talks with locals, because that's the best advice I could ever give. See you around.
Good night, and thank you for watching.